Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top laners for Season 5, Patch 5.9. So first up on my list, I have Xin Zhao, and not a lot of people are playing Xin Zhao right now, but I think he's a pretty good pick, to be honest with you. The Black Cleaver getting those changes to it really favors Xin Zhao because he's going to be able to get a lot of those armor shred procs off on the opponent, and it makes him a really good pick in this meta in my opinion. He's a pretty strong duelist as well because he's got the damage from his Q, which is actually quite a bit. In the early game, his Q does a lot of damage, and once you get the third strike off on the Q, you get the knock up as well. So then you'll be able to get another auto attack in after that while the enemies will be knocked up in the air. So it just makes him a pretty good duelist. He's also got surprising burst damage with his, just with the damage from his Q. Like, it's actually really good. I like to max out my Q when playing as Xin Zhao because once you do get that maxed out, he does a ton of burst damage. He's also a bruiser, so you can build like 1 or 2 AD items. Definitely pick up the Black Cleaver first, and then he can build tanky after that. He's also got a great ultimate, which can be really game-changing if you can get it off nicely in a team fight, because you could completely isolate a target. Like, for example, if you engage with Xin Zhao and say you like flash behind and knock the AD carry into your team, then that could win you the game right there. So I do think a good Xin Zhao player definitely can use his ultimate and be able to win games just because of a nicely used ultimate in a team fight. He's also got strong CC with his Q and his E as well as his ultimate, and he's got sustain as well with his W. He's also a very strong tower pusher because his Q does the extra damage to the towers, and he's also going to be getting attack speed from his W. Some cons to Xin Zhao are he doesn't have any escape, so you have to be careful that you're not pushing out in lane too far, and if you are, that you're warding. He's also quite easily kited if his E is on cooldown as well. So next up on my list, I have Irelia. Pros to Irelia are she's got a very strong mid-game power spike. Once you can get to that mid-game and finish your Trinity Force, she does a ton of damage, and I would definitely recommend building the Trinity Force as your first item in every game as Irelia, and then depending on how the game is going, either go full tank after that, or build maybe like Blade of the Ruined King, or even the Black Cleaver isn't a bad choice on her either. She's also a bruiser, so like I said, build Trinity Force and then just go full tank and you can still do really well. She has the dash on her Q, which is also really nice for picking enemies out, and you can also use it in lane to surprise your opponents because it what it does is whenever you kill a minion or kill an enemy, you get the reset on it, so you can dash to a low health minion, and then after that you can jump on your opponent and they won't expect it most of the time. She also has a 2-second stun, and if you can get this off on the enemy AD carry in a team fight, then they're basically going to be dead before they even get out of the stun. She also has true damage on her W, which is really nice for trading in lane, and she's got sustain on her W as well. She's also a very strong duelist because of that 2-second stun that she can get, and her passive is also very strong for team fighting because it's going to be very hard to lock Irelia down with CC due to her passive. Some cons to Irelia, or one con to Irelia, is that she does have a weaker early game, so I wouldn't recommend going aggressive in the early game, and I would definitely recommend building a Crystalline Flask so you can sustain the first few levels, because Irelia's early game really isn't that great. So next up on my list, I have Gnar, and right now Gnar is definitely my favorite top laner in the game. With the new Black Cleaver getting changed, or with the Black Cleaver getting changed, I do think he is a much stronger top laner right now, and I've really been enjoying him. So if you guys haven't played Gnar this patch, then I would definitely recommend it. So I like to just build Black Cleaver on him, and then after that, depending on how the game is going, I might build another AD item, or I'll just go full tank after that, and he still does a load of damage. He doesn't have any mana either, so he can just spam out his Q in lane and get a lot of poke off by doing that. He's a bruiser as well, so like I said, just build the Black Cleaver and then go full tank, and you'll end up doing really well. He's also a great laner because he is a ranged top laner, and he's very hard to zone in lane because he can just sit back and CS with his Q if he does get low on HP. He's also a great team fighter because if you can get in Mega Gnar during a team fight, the amount of CC you have in Mega Gnar is just really good. And if you are a If you do know how to play Gnar correctly, then you can time when your Mega Gnar happens before a team fight, because you can just keep proccing your passive on like minions, and then once the team fight is about to start, you can just go all out spamming your Q on minions or spamming your Q and auto attacks on the enemies, hit your Mega Gnar, and then just jump in and do a load of CC. He also has percentage health damage with his W, which makes him a great pick in this meta, and he has the gap closer on his E, which is really good for just getting out of sticky situations. He can use it in lane really well, because if he's pushed out in lane and the enemy jungler comes to gank, he can hop on one of his minions and he'll get increased range on that jump. So you can make a lot of cool plays with Gnar's W in the jungle and in lane. And he's also got really strong CC in Mega Form, like I said. Some cons to Gnar are he is harder to play in my opinion, because you do really have to be knowledgeable about, or you do have to be wary about your Mega Gnar. You don't want to have it at unopportune times, because you always want to be able to be in Mega Gnar during team fights, and if you can't time it correctly, then you're not going to be as useful when playing as Gnar. And Mega Gnar doesn't last as long as it used to. Next up on my list, I have Vladimir. So Vladimir is really good in this meta because he does sustain damage with his Q and with his E as well, which is why I think he's a really good pick right now. He's a very strong team fighter because of his AoE damage. He's got great AoE damage with his W, his E, and his ultimate. He's also a very strong laner because he's got great sustain and great poke with his Q. And once he gets to level 9, he gains a really good power spike because his Q becomes on like a 2 or 3 second cooldown once you do get that maxed out, and he's just going to be able to sustain in lane really well once you do hit level 9. He's also pretty hard to gank. Unless Vladimir's pushed up all the way to the enemy's tower, it's going to be hard to gank him because he's got his W, which he can use to obviously go invulnerable, and then if he has his flash up, it's just going to be really hard to lock down Vladimir. Some cons to Vlad are he does have a weaker early game. The first few levels he's not as strong because his Q is on a fairly long cooldown, so you can use this to, or you can take advantage of this in the early game when you're playing against Vladimir. If he's playing too aggressive and you're playing a strong early game champion in the top lane, then definitely look to solo kill him in the first few levels. And he also does not have a gap closer. So last but not least, on my top 5, I have Hecarim. Pros to Hecarim are he's got great CC with his E and his ultimate. He's a bruiser as well, so I like to just build Trinity Force on Hecarim and then go full tank, and he still does really well. He's also a great laner because he has sustain with his W, and he's also got pretty good dueling potential because of his Q and his E and his W as well. He's also got really insane engage. If you can get home guards on Hecarim and you can make a nice TP play behind the enemies, then you're just going to be able to jump onto the AD carry and burst them down, and it's just really hard for the enemies to deny your engage because you're going to be coming in so fast and the enemies won't be able to react most of the time. He's also got great mobility with his E and his ultimate, and he's got a very strong mid-game power spike once he does pick up the Trinity Force. Some cons to Hecarim are Gnar does pretty well against him in lane, so I wouldn't recommend picking Hecarim into Gnar. And he is also weak if you do fall behind with Hecarim because he's an all-in champion, and if you fall behind, then you're not going to want to be obviously ulting in and getting into the middle of a team fight because you're probably just going to get bursted down really quickly. So first up on the honorable mentions, I have Riven. Riven's also a pretty good champion with the Black Cleaver, so I would recommend building that item on her. Maybe not as your first item, but definitely I would recommend picking it up at some point in the game. She's got a pretty strong early game, and if you can get ahead with Riven in the early game and go for an all-in on your opponent, then you can just snowball the game really hard, and I do think she's a very strong pick because of that. Next on the honorable mentions, I have Wukong. So Wukong's also a very good champion with the Black Cleaver, so if you are playing Wukong in the top lane, then definitely pick that item up as your first item on him. The item just works so well because he's going to be getting those procs with his ultimate, and he's pretty much going to max out on the amount of procs that he can get because his ultimate is going to be getting you all those procs when you are hitting the enemies with it. So I do think Wukong is a very good pick right now. He's a great team fighter, and he does have a very strong power spike once you do hit level 6 as him. Next up, I have Nasus. So Nasus, he isn't the strongest early game champion in the game, but if you can find that right matchup in the top lane and you can get those stacks with your Q, then he becomes a really strong pick once you get to late game as him. So if you're looking for a strong late game champion, then Nasus is a pretty good pick. Next up, I have Rumble. So Rumble, in my opinion, is harder to play than some of the other top laners because his ultimate can be awkward to land if you're new to playing him. So I would definitely recommend trying him in some normal games before heading into ranked with him due to his higher skill cap. But if you can land your ultimate, it's really game changing, and you don't even have to do really well in lane as Rumble to do well throughout the game, because even if you go like even in lane or you do end up losing lane, if you can get a well placed ultimate off in a team fight, it could definitely swing the momentum onto your team's side. Next up, I have Maokai. So Maokai is also one of my favorite top laners in the game. He's just a solid pick, it seems like, in every single meta. He's a great team fighter because of the amount of CC he has, and if you have a strong mechanically skilled AD carry on your team, then you can definitely protect them really well in a team fight because he's got great peel with his W, his Q, and his E as well. So I definitely think that Maokai is one of the stronger tanks in the game. Next up, I have Sion. So even though Sion did get nerfed quite a bit recently, I do think he is still a very strong pick. He's still a good lane bully because of the damage coming out of his Q, and he's got the shield with his W, which makes him negate a lot of damage in lane as well, and his W actually does a surprising amount of damage if you can get the damage proc off on the enemies. He's also a very strong team fighter because of the amount of CC he has, so if you're looking for another strong CC tank, then Sion is definitely a pretty good pick. And last but not least, on my honorable mentions, I have Malphite. So Malphite's also definitely one of my personal favorite top laners. I just like how he's a very strong team fighter and he's got great pick potential with his ultimate. You don't even have to have a strong early game as Malphite to be productive in the mid to late game, because if you can get a multi-man ultimate off in a team fight, then the chances of you winning that fight are going to be very strong. So if you are looking into playing Malphite, then just start Crystalline Flask in the early game, sustain the early game, and then once you get to the mid game and to the late game, then he does really well. So that is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.